the neurosurgeon came in and he said, "Hey, gonna be honest with you, like this is not a great situation. You need to have surgery. Your symptoms have gotten progressively worse, and you're starting to have some symptoms that are manifesting in a physical manner. And like, I'm concerned about a major medical event." At this point, I had not had a seizure or a stroke or anything along those lines, but they really didn't want to keep playing with fire, and so doctor said, "Where are you from?" I said, "From the Philadelphia area." And he said, "You need to go home. You need to be with your family. There's good hospitals there, good doctors there. This is something that you need to go be with them."
Imagine you're 22 years old at a major university where you're playing D1 football with aspirations to go to the NFL. And then you're told you have a rare brain cancer with only months to live. That's my guest today. His name is Rob Long. He was a former All-American punter at Syracuse University. And in 2010, during his senior season, he was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. His treatment lasted 14 months, ending his NFL aspirations. But Rob's story doesn't end there. Eventually, Rob went on to graduate from Syracuse University with a bachelor's and then a master's in new media management from the Newhouse School. He eventually became the executive director of an organization called Uplifting Athletes in 2018. Uplifting Athletes, which we'll talk about today, is now funded more than $1.2 million in research grants to the next generation of researchers, and has provided unique uplifting experiences to more than 2,000 people who have been impacted by a rare disease, which we're going to definitely talk about today. Rob, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let's start at the beginning, Rob. Tell me a little bit about, for the audience who's not familiar with you, where did you grow up and what drew you to sports and football?
Sure. So I was born in Westchester, Pennsylvania, right outside Philadelphia. Grew up, me and my sister grew up together. She was 2 years older than me. She ended up becoming a professional ballet dancer. She was incredibly gifted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so sports was something I loved as long as I can remember. My dad was a Philadelphia Eagles season ticket holder, and we, we're a Philly sports household. And so I just would watch sports all the time, and I wanted to do what the guys on TV were doing. And so started pretty early on, usual soccer and baseball and ice hockey, from about 4 years old, and just became my passion and something that I truly loved. And just the team aspect of it, working together, is something that was amazing to me. Was fortunate to kind of like continue on this path, then find my way into high school playing hockey. And I actually at one point freshman year stopped all my other sports that I was playing to focus on my ice hockey career. And about 12 months later, I found myself at football practice with a couple of my friends. I was actually waiting for them to finish up, and I was kind of kicking the ball around. And the coach said, "Hey, we need somebody to kick. Why don't you join us?" And I was like, "Yeah, my mom's never gonna let me play football, so probably not worth the conversation." I got home that day, and my mom said, "Why'd the football coach call and ask if you could play football?" And I said, "I had nothing to do with that." Long story short.
So he must have noticed something special for him to ask you about it and call your mom up and tell her.
Yeah, he did. He did. And his name is Dan Driscoll. He's actually a former Eagle himself. So that was kind of where this all started. I played for a Pop Warner team as a freshman. And I honestly thought that would be my 1 year of football and continue on to play hockey. Sophomore year, I got into high school, and at Downingtown West High School, Coach Mike Milano, he's now in the PA Football Hall of Fame, called me down to his office and said, "Hey, I heard you can kick." And I was like, I guess so. And so he asked me to come try out for the team, and I was kicking first game sophomore year, and just kind of fell in love with the challenge and the intricacies of kicking, and then eventually punting. And fast forward another year or so, and still thinking I'm going to play hockey in college, I get a scholarship offer to Syracuse University to play football. And, it was a dream come true. I went on an official visit to Syracuse at the time, and Coach Greg Robinson was there. He had his 2 Super Bowl rings sitting on his desk, and he said, "I want you to come play football at Syracuse." And it was a really, really hard thing to turn down, and eventually, made my way up to Syracuse, and started a really awesome journey.
So talk to us a little about when, your life changed, that moment in your life where you got ultimately diagnosed. So what symptoms were you experiencing? How long had you been having symptoms for? Kind of walk us through that.
So I get to Syracuse. I ended up playing as a true freshman, had a great season, ended up being a freshman All-American. And from there, I was pretty naive during most of my career there, and was really just happy to be there. It probably wasn't until junior year that, NFL scouts would come to practice, and, the coaches would come and they'd say, "Hey, like, you can do this for a living. Like, this is a career path for you." So heading into senior year, I was probably one of the top ranked punters in the country, and knew all I had to do was continue to build upon what I had done my first 3 years at Syracuse. And, I would, figure out where I was going to play football professionally. So we go senior year, we get started, and our first game's at the University of Washington. We travel out to the University of Washington, and on that flight, I get very sick. We land, not feeling real well the whole night, throwing up.
Had that been the first time you got sick?
Yeah, it was, to be honest, Will, it was the first time I'd really noticed anything. And, we kind of chalked it up to food poisoning, ate something bad. I was vomiting all night. Go to game time. Getting flu into the locker room. The coach was like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, like, it'll be fine." Go out, I play, and do well. And this pattern starts to emerge. Every time we flew my senior year, I would be sick, and it happened infrequently enough where we didn't quite, stitch it together.
But outside of the flying, you didn't have any symptoms.
So as the season progressed, headaches started to start pretty consistently, significantly. Starting to have some trouble with my vision, sensitivity to light. I walk into practice one day, I'm like, "Man, are the lights in here brighter than they usually are?" And somebody's like, "No, I don't think so." And it was all these things that, in my head, I'm 21 years old. Otherwise in exceptional health, very fit, working out, eating well, literally everything you could do to take care of yourself. So there's never a thought in my mind that, there's something wrong. Right up until Thanksgiving morning, 2010, wake up and was just unbelievably sick. I remember, barely making it out of my bed to the bathroom. I start throwing up, and I can't stop. It's nothing I've ever experienced before or since.
Is it like it's not throwing up like when you got food poisoning. It's just like, it's more like, you could tell it's more like a neurological thing throwing up.
I couldn't tell it was a neurological thing, but there was something that wasn't normal about the amount that I was doing. Cause like after so long, you don't have anything left in your stomach. You're literally throwing up, and so
Yeah.
I finally stopped long enough to get down to the football facility. It's only a quarter mile away. So I get down, I go into the training staff and I say, "Hey, like, I've just been really sick. I don't know what's wrong." It's all right. Like, we'll give you some pretzel sticks and some Pepto-Bismol and like get your stomach settled. They gave me the pretzel sticks and Pepto-Bismol. Immediately, I started throwing up again. And I remember at that point, kind of like falling to my backside and just being like, "Man, there's something wrong with me," and started crying at that point. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. It felt for the first time that I had fully lost control of what my body was doing. So
you couldn't even, you're saying like you felt you couldn't even like hold your balance.
Yeah, I think it was just more overwhelming because I was just so like, the vomiting was excessive. And so it got to a point where you're just like, what is going on? And so through this process, I'm like, there's something wrong. Doctors are trying to help. As the day goes on, this is Thanksgiving, I start to feel incrementally better. And so we're like, all right, let's see how the day goes. 2 days later, we have a game against Boston College. It's our final home game. I play in that game. When I played in that game, it was the first time that when I was playing, I didn't know what, as a punter, the ball was going to leave my hand if it was going to hit my foot. I had kind of really lost control of the coordination aspect, and it started to feel like something that, even as a 21-year-old stubborn athlete, like there was something that I couldn't really avoid any longer. And I remember the girl who I was dating at the time kind of like pulled me aside because she had seen this kind of progress throughout the last few months. She probably saw it more than anybody, and she said, "Hey, like you got to see a doctor. Like I'm done dealing with you, talking to you until you talk to a doctor." And so I go back to the training staff and, hey, kind of like come clean with everything and say, "Hey, like I know you guys know I've been coming to get the medicine for headaches and haven't been feeling well. And like, I think there's something more wrong." And so they said, "It's all right. Like we'll go and we'll get you with the team doctor." So I go meet with the team doctor that Monday and says, "Hey, we're just going to try and rule some things out. We'll send you for an MRI and go get an MRI." First time I ever gotten an MRI before. I'm 21 years old. It's new experience. I'm on the phone with my mom. I'm joking, like filling out the medical forms. And I go in to get that MRI, and I vividly remember that radiologist, after the first 5 minutes of that scan, she came out, she was white as a ghost. And she said, "Hey, like everything's okay. I'm just going to need to run a few more tests." And she became very nervous. And, at this point, like I feel okay. Like I feel fine. It doesn't feel like something's wrong. And, I finished that MRI, and then I go back to meet with the training staff to get the reading of the MRI. And ironically, as we're filming this, it was 15 years ago yesterday. And I remember sitting in the waiting room, at the training staff for the student athletes at Syracuse, and waiting to go, and I'm the last person that they see. And I now understand why. So I go in, and all my coaches are standing there, the entire training staff. There's probably 12 people in the room. That has only happened when a player has a season-ending injury. Your coaches are there to console you. The staff is there to answer any questions. So I walked into the room, and I immediately knew, like, yeah, this isn't good. And I kind of remember making that joke, like, "Oh, like, well, what are you guys all doing here?" Nobody kind of reacted, and the doctor just said, "Hey, you need to sit down. We got to talk." And so, all right. So he sits down, and he was clearly uncomfortable with what he had to say. And he said, "You have a large brain tumor. You need to see a specialist first thing in the morning." And, that's pretty much all we know. And I was kind of, to be honest, I was taken back, but it didn't hit me. It didn't resonate. I didn't understand. Like I had played an entire football season. I had played a game 3 or 4 days earlier.
Yeah.
The following morning, I go and see a neuroscientist in Syracuse, and the doctor didn't even walk in the room yet. My MRI was sitting on the computer screen, and we were, myself and the trainer walk into the room, and I was just, kind of messing around. I said, "What are we looking at here?" And he was like, that's your brain." I was like, "Okay." And I was like, what is this big white thing? He's like, "That's not supposed to be there. That's the tumor." And I remember before the doctor even came in, I was at that point, I was knocked off my feet, and I literally fell back into my chair, and I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, that's a tumor that's not supposed to be there.
Right.
And so from there, that's when it first hit me. The tumor took up a quarter of my brain. It did not look like the brain of somebody who A, was a healthy person, or B, had very much longer to live. And I knew that from my complete lack of medical expertise, just seeing, putting two and two together.
Yeah,
And
you don't have
doctor,
to be a radiologist. You could see the white and the MRI,
yeah,
right?
yeah, you can see what's not supposed to be there. Once it was pointed out to me, it was pretty clear. And so the radio or the neurosurgeon came in and he said, "Hey, going to be honest with you, like this is not a great situation. You need to have surgery. Your symptoms have gotten progressively worse, and you're starting to have some symptoms that are manifesting in a physical manner. And like I'm concerned about a major medical event. At this point, I had not had a seizure or a stroke or anything along those lines, but they really didn't want to keep playing with fire, and so." Doctor said, "Where are you from?" I said, "From the Philadelphia area." And he said, "You need to go home. You need to be with your family. There's good hospitals there, good doctors there. This is something that you need to go be with them." And 2.5 hours later, I was on a flight home to Philadelphia. I called my parents, um, told them, what was going on, and I needed a ride home from the airport. And
How did your parents react?
um, it was tough. The day that they found out about this, earlier that day, my mom's youngest sister had been diagnosed with breast cancer. So,
Oh,
in the matter of about 8 hours, my mom receives the news that her youngest sister's got breast cancer, and her son, has a brain tumor, and it was tough. It was very tough.
wow.
I knew I called my dad because I I didn't think I could actually hold it together in a conversation with my mom. And I didn't even know about my aunt at the time. My dad told me when I talked to him. And so we got home and just tried to, collect ourselves as a family, and go into Philly and meet with the head of neurosurgery at Jefferson. And he was fantastic. He said, "Have you ever been ice fishing? We're going to go ice fishing, and we're going to cut a hole in your skull, and we're going to try and pull the tumor out." And I spent my 22nd birthday being prepped for brain surgery. Had the craniotomy on December 14th, 2010, and coming out of surgery, was probably the first time in about 4 months that I didn't have a headache. And I had forgotten what it was like to not have a constant pressure in my head. It's kind of remarkable how the human body adapts to those types of things. Um, and so at that point, we're sitting there, it's December 14th, and feeling pretty good. The surgery went well. I felt good. I maintained mobility and vision and all those things that they're concerned about when you go through brain surgery. And
Where was the tumor in your head exactly?
so it's sat in the back right portion of my brain, the parietal lobe.
Right below.
Yeah, so it was sitting in the back there, and had basically looked like it had grown down into the middle of my brain. And so they were able to get about 90% of the tumor resected from surgery, which is remarkable for brain surgery. But the challenge is that there was still some left in the middle of my head. And, our hope was that it would be benign and not something we'd have to really, worry about, and maybe wouldn't need further treatment, and I could kind of get on with my career. Um,
Were
but
they worried about it growing back?
I think they were trying to figure out what it was first.
Mm.
And that's when 6 days later. So on December 20th, we go back to Jefferson University Hospital, and go to meet with the doctor. And that's when we were there to find out if basically if it was benign or malignant. And doctor walked into the room and said, "You have a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma, um, and there's no cure for what you have." And when I was 22 years old, thinking that I had a future in football and playing professionally, um, life switches pretty quickly. Um, I basically said, "Well, what can we do?" And doctor said basically there's something we could try, but I essentially can't make promises on what is going to work and what wouldn't. And so he put me on a treatment regimen that involved chemo and radiation every day for 6.5 weeks, and then a supplemental 12 months of chemotherapy after that. The chemotherapy that I took was called temozolomide. It's the first ever chemotherapy to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. And one of the things, kind of going through this, I just kind of did everything I could to take care of myself and stick to my regimen and kind of move forward with, whatever the doctor said and hope for the best. It was a really challenging journey, about 14 months from start to finish, from the surgery to my last chemotherapy treatment. And through that point, like you said before, like, are they worried about it coming back? Yeah, like that is the most deadly part of brain cancer. Is even if you can have the surgery, get it resected, the challenge is it comes back, and that's why it's so deadly. And that's a hard thing to mentally deal with, is waiting essentially for this other shoe to drop. And so going through treatment and receiving that first clean MRI was awesome, but I never felt that sense of relief. And it was something that took me several years, almost a decade, to kind of feel comfortable in the fact that, like, hey, like, I'm doing good. We'll continue to do good, medically speaking, and just try and proceed with my life as best as possible. Because when I was given that diagnosis, I never imagined being able to turn 30. I never imagined being married and having a family or having a home, or any of these things. They just became things that seemingly were not in the cards for me, and tried to just figure out how to take things a day at a time.
It's amazing. Are you taking any medication now for it?
No. So I am presently doing MRIs every 5 months as a checkup, but I've been doing really well from that standpoint. I think a big part of my journey was the mental and emotional toll that this all took, and the challenges that have been involved with that. And I think for me, as I move forward, it's trying to just take care of myself as best I can, a day at a time. And that's, physically, mentally, emotionally, all those things. And I think one of the nice things that has come from this is, the things I'm able to do today with uplifting athletes, and kind of that transition, from that medical journey to trying to take, the experience that I've had and trying to do some good with that journey.
Yeah, I want to hear about that and what you're doing at uplifting athletes. I guess, probably a lot of the audience is going to wonder, especially at such a young age, to be able to deal with that. It's not easy, right?
No.
What kind of sustained you? Are you a man of faith? And kind of talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think the thing that sustained me was really two things. I learned through my journey, that my mom, when she was just 7, her dad passed away. And, when you're younger, you just know that you never really got to meet your grandparents, and you don't really know why. But,
right.
That day when I was in the exam room, the doctor came in and said, do you have a history of brain cancer? And, that was when I learned that my mom's dad had passed from brain cancer when he was 37.
So you never knew that he had brain cancer?
I knew he had cancer, never knew what type. And it was just one of those things. Like, we have a unfortunately, rather significant cancer history in our family. And, so I just never occurred to me to, like, dig deeper. My mom was 7 when he passed. And so I learned literally, like, when I was being diagnosed, that.
Did he have the same type of brain cancer, Rob?
So we don't know. He was diagnosed in a time where a a lot of the medical advancements that I benefited from were not around for him.
Yeah.
So he passed in 1963, and so there's just not a lot they were able to do at that point. Pretty much from
Sure.
the moment he had his brain surgery, he was never really the same, and it didn't make it much longer after that. And so it was really hard to be able to ever identify what the type of tumor was. The challenge was that this was kind of something that we wanted to understand. Like, is this genetic? Is it environmental? Is there something else that is causing this? And never really were able to unpack that. But I think for me, not wanting my parents to have to bury me was like a huge piece of this. It was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to take care of myself and to get better and to just kind of push forward. And the other piece of this that was really significant to me was like, I didn't want this diagnosis to determine what I could and could not do in life. And I wanted really badly to get back to football, to find a way to make it back. And that those were like two things that like every day, like I would wake up, I would take my chemotherapy, like I'd have to go down for radiation, and then I'd go to the gym. And like there's photos and videos of me. I'd go to the gym, I had no hair, and I was down probably 30 pounds, but like it just gave me something. It gave me something to work towards, something to drive forward. And for
The
me,
hope of going back to play football.
the hope, yeah, that there was something there for me to do. And like that was what I focused my time and attention on. I'm at a stage in my life where many of my closest friends, they're finishing college, they're going down to the shore for the week and getting share houses, they're going on vacation, they're taking jobs and internships, and like I was kind of stuck. I was stuck at home and not really able to work and do everything while going through treatment. And so I had to find something, and that was kind of my path forward. And it was probably one of the single most beneficial things to me to have that goal, that forward goal of like, hey,
Sure.
I'm gonna do this. And so fortunately for me, like that was what I had to work towards. Now I never played football again after that diagnosis, but
what was the day? Well, do you remember the day where you were like at peace with, or you knew that you would never go back to playing football? What was that day like?
So I went through probably about 2 years after my diagnosis. I worked out, and I ended up working out for probably about over a dozen NFL teams in that time. And some of those workouts went horribly and some of them went really well. And it was very much a learning experience for me. I think early on in that journey, I was very angry and upset with the cards that I had been dealt. And I was basically trying to get back into football to prove a point, and not because I loved it, not because I wanted to do it. And when we talked earlier about like why did you do sports? I loved it. I loved the competition. I loved being a part of that team. And it took me a while to realize like I can't do this unless I want to, and I find joy and I love it. And so there was a bit of a transition there of like trying to find that love of what I was doing, because I had to teach myself all over again how to kick, how to punt, how to do these things that I had spent thousands of hours trying to perfect. Had to start over. And I've made the analogy of like, imagine going to medical school and you spend 7 years in medical school and you go through your residency and you finish it and you're ready to become a doctor, and then somebody comes and says, all right, go start over. None of that matters anymore. And like that's essentially what it felt like for me. Is you do all this work from high school through college, I spend 7 years playing football, trying to get to be as good as I can, to be going into that draft, that 2011 NFL draft. I think I was the top rated NFL punter coming out of college. And that diagnosis changed everything. And so that journey of persistence and of grit, of just saying, hey, like life's not fair, but just got to keep going. And through that, I got to a point where I realized, and this was that moment, was that I don't need football to be successful. And that was an important thing for me to acknowledge for myself, is that there's a life beyond, the football field. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I believed enough in myself and in the upbringing that I had, the education that I had, the community I had, that like I'll figure it out. And there was an NFL workout camp in Arizona. I went to the camp. I did pretty well at that camp, and I said, if it's next big, it'll be. If not, I'm going to go do something else. And so that's probably around like 2012, 2013. And at that time, my teammates had started the Syracuse chapter of Uplifting Athletes in my honor. And to this day, it's one of the coolest things that's ever happened for me. And so I learned more about the organization. I would volunteer at Syracuse and help provide, I would speak to the team, volunteer efforts, help fundraising, whatever I could do. And as I learned more about the organization, I reached out to the founder and I just said, hey, is this something I could do full time? Like, I really am passionate about this work. And fortunately for me, the founder of Uplifting Athletes, a gentleman named Scott Shirley, said, yeah, like this, I think this is something that'd be a great fit for you. So Scott brought me onto the team at Uplifting Athletes. And about 6 months later, we hired another employee. His name's Brett Brackett. And Brett and I actually played against each other in college. Brett played at Penn State. I played at Syracuse. Oh. So we played against each other twice. I told him we don't like to talk about it. We got smoked both times. But Brett was an awesome guy. We became fast friends. And we just decided, like, this is like, we were invested in making Uplifting Athletes successful. In 2018, the board of directors of Uplifting Athletes appointed Brett and I to the executive leadership of the organization. And, really from there, it was, how can we take this incredible platform and maximize the impact that we have as an organization? And that was just a starting point for us. And I think a big transition point for me in my life, to be able to take all these things that I had experience from playing sports and going through my diagnosis, and do some good with it. And I think that was something that was really valuable and important for me at that time in my life.
So tell us, what does Uplifting Athletes do? What do they do?
So our mission is to harness the power of sports to build a community that invests in the lives of people impacted by rare diseases. So we talk about our programs as serving the rare disease community today, tomorrow, and in the future. Our Today pillar is carried out through our Experiences program, where we are able to connect individuals and families diagnosed with a rare disease and match them up with athletes and athletic organizations that we work with, and be able to provide unique experiences that provide hope and joy for these families that are going time in their lives. And for the athletes, they're always more than happy to help, support, and to give back. So it's been a fantastic program. We kind of relaunched that program in 2022 and have now served over 2,500 people, which has been an incredible journey for us. Our Tomorrow pillar is carried out through our rare disease research program, most notably our Young Investigator Draft, which is modeled after the NFL draft. But instead of drafting the top athletes in the country, we draft and fund the next generation of rare disease researchers. It's held at the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium each year. We have now held 8 Young Investigator Drafts. Our 9th Young Investigator Draft is happening on January 26th. January 31st, 2026. And we couldn't be more proud of the progress that program has had. We launched that in 2018 and have now funded over $1.2 million in research grants. Those research grants that we have funded have been the genesis for over $150 million in supplemental funding to those researchers that we have funded. So it has really been for us about planting those seeds throughout the rare disease community, and something that we're just incredibly proud of. It's, for me personally, probably my favorite thing that we do, seeing these researchers get an opportunity to pursue their work. We have funded research for the first time in several disease states. The way that the program works is purely through collaboration. We work with disease-specific advocacy organizations who nominate researchers, and then we collectively co-fund those grants for those researchers and empower them with the tools and resources that they need to be successful in their careers. And then the final pillar, our future pillar, is our leadership development. So at the core of Uplifting Athletes, we are really driven by the platform that both college and professional student athletes have. We have a network of Division I student athletes that we work with. We're at over 40 different colleges across the country, over 50 different teams at those colleges. And we have an annual leadership conference where we bring all the student athletes that we work with together and educate them about the mission of Uplifting Athletes and empower them with the tools and resources to be lifelong advocates for the rare disease community. And a new thing that we're doing for 2026 is also to provide new career paths and career opportunities for the student athletes we work with through our leadership conference. So not only are we bringing in our partners that we work with in the pharma and biotech space, but also some new partners that are in consulting or in tech or in business development or real estate, and giving these student athletes different career paths and opportunities. And the benefit there for us is that we have these incredible ambassadors and advocates for the rare disease communities, spreading their wings in all these different industries and carrying that with them wherever they go in their careers.
I love that idea of the Young Investigator Draft.
Yeah.
You know why I love that? It's because, in our society, we focus a lot on celebrities and athletes, right? But this is a great way to recognize the people that really don't get a recognition, right? The scientists. If I ask probably somebody, who won the Super Bowl last year, people know. If I ask who got the Nobel Prize in physics or chemistry, probably nobody knows. So I think that, it's great that you're doing something to recognize those individuals. And it sounds like you partner with pharmaceutical and biotech companies. What's their involvement in what you do?
Yeah, so we do. And so when we were building, Brent and I were building Uplifting Athletes, we kind of sat back and said, where do we go from here? We didn't have any corporate partners. We didn't have any, sponsorship funding. We didn't really have any intellectual property that we owned at that time. We had our on-campus fundraising events that the student athletes would have, but I couldn't go to a company and say, hey, sponsor the Penn State Lift for Life. We don't own Penn State's IP. So we had to create something of our own. And that's when we created a Young Investigator Draft. And so Brent and I kind of sat there and had a brainstorm session of where do we go that we don't have to explain to somebody what a rare disease is, that they're invested in this community and they have the means to help and support. And it became pretty clear to us, hey, we need to go to the companies working in life sciences, in pharma and biotech, and show how we're doing something unique for this community. And it got going pretty quickly, but you get a lot of people that say you want to do a draft, but for research, they didn't quite piece it all together. And so once we kind of pulled it together and we had our first Young Investigator Draft, I think from there it was super exciting. And so we have a lot of companies that we work with that support that program, help us put on that event, and really engage with us in a way that we try to make the information and the communication around what happens in the rare disease community a little bit more palatable to our audience, right? We understand that the science of rare disease and medicine can be very complex and can candidly be very overwhelming for people. And so through our Young Investigator Draft, we make sure that we have somebody there to communicate what is happening in layman's terms. And I think actually one of your previous guests, Tegenbaum, he is our Young Investigator Draft. He's our draft analyst. He is the Mel Kiper of our Young Investigator Draft.
Okay.
He
does great.
He's incredible. So he does a wonderful job of distilling this complex research that these researchers are doing, in a way that's digestible for everybody there. And he does a fantastic job of that and communicating that. And so we really take a lot of pride in taking what is done, the incredible work that's done both in the labs and at these companies, and making sure that people understand the impact that it's having, especially in the rare disease community. There's over 30 million people living with a rare disease, 95% of which don't have access to an FDA-approved treatment. And so, we talk about, and I was one of those 27.5 million people that walked into a doctor's office and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "Hey, you have this rare cancer and there's no approved treatment." And so I know what that feels like. I know what that journey is like. And I think for me, the importance of that work that we're doing in funding research through the Young Investigator Draft is incredible. And if you'll humor me, I have a quick story that I'll tell to kind of bring this full circle. So as I've been going through my work with uplifting athletes, you learn more. And I was honestly very naive when I was going through this journey, when I was 21, 22 years old. So a couple of years ago, I started to ask my doctor and just try to understand, like, hey, like, why did you give me this chemotherapy? And he said, well, it was essentially my best guess. We didn't have any clinical data to support that for another 6 years. So it was quite literally a shot in the dark. And so I'm like, all right, that's a little unnerving, but I'm glad it worked out. And so I did a little bit of research, and temozolomide was that chemotherapy that I took. Temozolomide was developed by a man named Dr. Malcolm Stevens. A couple years ago, I was doing this treasure hunt of where this all started. I found Dr. Malcolm Stevens. He was a researcher at the University of Nottingham, still at 86 years old. And I sent Dr. Stevens an email and I said, "Hey, my name's Rob Long. I work with this organization, Uplifting Athletes. We have this Young Investigator Draft program. I just wanted to share this with you because your work saved my life." And I didn't expect to get a response. I didn't, expect anything back. But a few days later, sure enough, I got an email. And Dr. Stevens emailed me back and said, "Rob, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for sharing about the work that you've done with uplifting athletes and through the Young Investigator Draft." Said you'd be interested in knowing that my journey as a researcher was started in April of 1980. I received a small seed grant from a nonprofit organization that gave me the money to open my lab and to hire a research assistant whose name was also Rob. In April of 1980, in a small lab in Birmingham, England, they first synthesized temozolomide. Because of all of the work done and by the advocates in the rare disease community, because of the passage of the Orphan Drug Act, temozolomide received fast track designation through the FDA. It still took several years and almost over 2 decades before it became approved and commercially available. But it did become available just a few years prior to my diagnosis. It was approved for glioblastoma's first ever chemotherapy to penetrate the blood-brain barrier for glioblastoma. And because of all of that work that Dr. Stevens did in that lab in April of 1980, that treatment was available for me to be used off-label and prescribed by my doctor when I was sitting in that hospital in December of 2010. And for me, it was a full circle moment to be able to go to the researchers that we fund and say, I hope that for you, the work that you do, that maybe not next year, maybe not 2 years or not 5 years from now, but 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, I hope you have the opportunity to meet the individuals whose lives you've saved and you've given more time with their loved ones, as I had the opportunity to do with Dr. Stevens. And for me, that kind of validated the importance of the work that we do with the Young Investigator Draft, and that kind of delayed gratification that it goes along with investing in researchers as young investigators and trying to give them starts in their careers, because it's not always going to work. We know that it's not 100% shooting percentage there. And so we really want to make sure that we're planting as many seeds as possible. And so, that kind of journey that I personally experienced without even knowing, when we developed the Young Investigator Draft, that I was the beneficiary of that type of work was something that was incredibly powerful for me.
Yeah, it's like full circle in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
To be able to hear that. So that's a beautiful story. And I'm sure for him, being able to see that, people are benefiting from the work that he's done. It's one of the things that I'm really excited about this year. I don't know if you saw, but the FDA has this National Priority
Yeah.
Voucher Review Program to try to fast track a lot of drugs. And I think that's a good move by the administration to try to get some of these drugs approved. Because, my mother, I'll share a quick story. She had gliosarcoma, but she passed away at 64. She only had it for a few months, and then they weren't really able to do much, and we lost her. But, the truth is that drug approvals a lot of times get held up because of bureaucracy. But one of the things I'm excited about is that now with AI, I think drug approvals, drug development is going to really should be much shorter. It's usually 8 to 10 years. I think it's going to go down from it's like 12 to 24 months. I think that's going to be exciting. We'll be able to bring more drugs to market and be able to help people with more rare disease. I worked in rare disease for a bit when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, and it was very rewarding to be able to help people, and see the families and the patient advocates, and just to see people be able to do basic activities in daily living that they couldn't do before. So, your story really resonated with me, which is why I wanted to have you on. It's an inspirational story. Where can people go to learn more about uplifting athletes?
So we go to our website, upliftingathletes.org, or we're also on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, always posting, always updating. I would say as a call to action, we're a nonprofit. Obviously, money and donations are always welcome and supportive. But just even taking the simple act of following us on social media help to grow our reach and our platform is something that is really meaningful for us as an organization. If you'd like to join us for our Young Investigator Draft, it's a really awesome event. It's at the Philadelphia Eagles Stadium on January 31st. Tickets are available. You can find them on our website. But yeah, this is something that we're just getting started. I know this is something we've been doing for 9 years, both Brett and I with the organization, but we really believe that we're building something special at Uplifting Athletes, and we're really excited about what the future has, both for the experiences program, those kind of three pillars of today, tomorrow, and the future, the experiences, the research, and the leadership development. I think we see great paths to being able to scale and expand those programs that we're really excited about.
That's great. That's really great. And I will definitely look into it. Actually, I would love to go to an event like that. That would be phenomenal. By the way, David Feigenbaum is actually, he's going to be a keynote speaker at our event. The ACMA is having a big pharma event. We have all the medical affairs leaders coming in April of 2026, and he's actually the keynote for our event. So looking forward to seeing him there.
Yeah, he's great. David was a part of our first draft class of the Young Investigator Draft in 2018. He's become a dear friend of mine and somebody who I look up to and respect greatly. He's done incredible work. Both with his Castleman's Disease Collaborative Network and the Every Cure organization. Just talk about the use of AI for helping to kind of find these different uses for repurposed therapies. An incredible person doing awesome work. He's a special one. That's a great selection for a keynote.
Yeah, we're excited to have him. Rob Long, it was great talking to you. Thanks again for having us. Be sure to put the link in the video below to Uplifting Athletes, and hopefully we'll have you back on soon. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.